Mom said, "We just can't afford the plane ticket. The family trip is canceled." I cried, but accepted it. But by chance, my aunt tagged Mom in a publication, pool, cocktail in hand, grinning from ear to ear. "Best family vacation ever," Dash was captioned. They lied. I turned to my husband and whispered, "Call a lawyer." Now, 5 minutes later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I sat motionless, as if frozen in time, staring at my phone screen. The neon glint of the newsfeed photo reflected in my eyes. A tropical resort. My mother Veronica, younger sister Ashley, Aunt Judith, and cousins are all there. Everyone is happy, everyone is smiling, everyone except me. 3 days ago, my mom called with tears in her voice. "Lauren, honey, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to cancel our family trip. Aunt Judith's medical expenses, store repairs. We're barely making ends meet." "But I already took a vacation. Ryan and I planned," I started. "I know, honey, and I'm so sorry. Why don't you two take a trip somewhere, and we'll save the family vacation for next year?" She sounded so genuinely sorry that I even felt guilty for my disappointment. And now this picture. Mom in a wide-brimmed hat, with a cocktail, by the pool of the very hotel we were all supposed to go to together. Day 2 of our paradise vacation. Thank you, Aunt Veronica, for organizing the best family trip ever. Aunt Judith's caption read, Day 2. That is, they flew out the day after talking to me. After I burst into tears, apologized to Ryan for the disrupted vacation, and started rearranging my plans. "Lauren?" Ryan's voice brought me back to reality. He was standing in the doorway with a cup of tea in his hands. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I silently held out my phone to him. Seeing his face change, I felt something inside finally break. Not just resentment or disappointment, something deeper, fundamental. "They went without me." My voice sounded unaccustomedly calm. Ryan carefully sat down next to me, but didn't hug me. He knew I needed space right now. "Lauren, I don't want to say I told you so, but you did." I finished for him. "For years you did." And it was true. Ryan had always seen what I refused to notice, how my family took advantage of my willingness to help, to sacrifice, to give in. How I was always the one who solved problems, loaned money, which was never paid back, canceled my plans for their emergency needs. "You know what the worst part is?" I finally looked at him. "Not that they went without me. It's that they lied, made up a whole story. They sat around and planned the best way to fool me." "What do you want to do?" Ryan asked. I looked at my phone screen. It was already glowing with a notification of 3 missed calls from my mom. Someone had probably managed to let her know I'd seen the publication. "I want the truth. The whole truth," I said, feeling something inside finally fall into place. "And I want to know what else they've been keeping from me." It was a moment of clarity. There had been too many oddities with the family business, the coffee shop chain my father had founded, over the past few years. After his death, my mother took over, but I was listed as a co-owner. Except I never saw any reports or profits. There were always excuses, reinvestment, temporary difficulties, the need to help my sister with her studies. "Call Mark," I turned to Ryan. "Right now." Mark was our friend and part-time lawyer. Ryan picked up his phone without question and started dialing. At that moment, my phone exploded with a ringing sound. "Mom." I dropped it. A second later, a call from my sister. I hung up again. Then Aunt Judith. I muted the sound and put the phone screen down. "Mark says he can meet tomorrow at 10, Ryan said, ending the call. "Good. I want him to go over every piece of paperwork related to the business, every piece of paper I've signed over the last 10 years. Ryan nodded, not hiding his relief. He'd watched me let my family manipulate me for years, and now he saw that something had finally changed. My phone continued to vibrate. Text messages poured in one after another. "Lauren, there's a misunderstanding," from my mom. "You've got it all wrong," from my sister. "Honey, we wanted to surprise you next week," from Mom again. All lies. I knew this with such absolute certainty that I had never experienced before. I stood up and walked over to the window. It was starting to rain outside, the drops drumming against the glass, creating a strangely soothing rhythm. For 32 years, I've been the comfortable daughter, the one who always understood, always forgave, always put the needs of others before her own. And what did I get in return? Lies and manipulation. Never again, I said out loud without turning around. I won't take it anymore. I could feel Ryan's gaze on my back, full of support and some quiet satisfaction. He'd been waiting for this moment for years. You know, he said, coming over and standing next to me by the window, sometimes the most important battles in life are the ones we fight for ourselves. I nodded. The phone continued to vibrate, filling the room with a silent insistence for attention. But for the first time in my life, I was willing to meet those demands on my own terms. No more concessions, no more blind trust. It was time to find out the whole truth, no matter how painful it might be. In the morning, on the way to Mark's office, I stared out the cab window and thought about how we'd gotten to this point. The memories came in waves, painful and clear, like I was rewatching a well-edited movie of my life. Frame 1. I'm 15. Early morning, the doorbell rings. Two stone-faced policemen announce that my father has died of a heart attack right in his coffee shop. It was instantaneous. He didn't agonize, they say, as if that should mean something when your world is falling apart. Something changed in our family that day. Not just because my father was gone. Roles changed, expectations changed. Mom, always so strong and collected, became a shadow of herself. I remember her sitting in the kitchen, staring into the space in front of her, and it felt like her body was here, and her soul was somewhere far away, with Dad. Lauren, you're the oldest now, she told me a week after the funeral. You have to help. I need your support. And I did. Cooking dinners, keeping an eye on the house, checking homework for Ashley, who was 11 at the time. I comforted my mom when she cried at night. I became a shoulder to lean on, a vest to cry into, a lightning rod for emotions. At 15, Ashley handled it differently. She became withdrawn, then rebellious. By the time she was 14, she was already skipping school, coming home past midnight, boring her teachers. She's grieving, my mother would say when I tried to discuss my sister's behavior. She needs time. Time passed, but nothing changed. Ashley rebelled. Mom made excuses. I tried to keep them both on track. I turned down an internship in another city because Mom can't handle it. Canceled plans for graduation because Ashley had a concert that same night. And, don't I want to support my sister? When I turned 18, my mom called me in for a serious talk about the future of the family business. Your father would want you to be a part of his legacy, she said, laying out the paperwork on the table. I'm formalizing a share in the company for you. That way, we can protect the business in case of stuff. I signed the papers almost without reading. At the time, I thought it was just a formality. My father's coffee shops were his pride. A small chain of 4 cozy establishments in different parts of the city. He designed the menu himself, talked to the suppliers himself, hired the staff himself. After his death, my mom took over, even though she had never run a business before. I'll manage, she said. For John's sake. For you girls. I remember looking at her with admiration. Her strength, her determination seemed like something incredible to me. I wanted to be just like her, strong, independent, able to take responsibility. Years passed. I graduated from college, earned a degree in marketing, found a job at an advertising agency. Ashley dropped out of university after her first semester, deciding it wasn't for her, and began an endless string of creative projects, none of which generated any income. Mom still ran the coffee shops, but every conversation with her turned into a list of difficulties: suppliers, competitors, taxes, repairs, new equipment. I helped as much as I could. Financially, when I got bonuses or promotions. With advice, using my knowledge of marketing. With time, spending weekends writing promotional materials or helping at the counter when one of the employees was sick. But the weirdness started when I was 25. I noticed that despite my efforts and investments, the financial situation of the coffee shops didn't seem to be improving. Times are tough, my mom sighed. The market is oversaturated. At the same time, I saw competitors' businesses growing, new coffee shops opening, and the industry growing. One day, I asked her to show me the reports. Why do you need that? Mom wondered. Dash. You trust me, don't you? I do everything for the family, for our common good. And I backed off. Again. Because the implication was clear. Doubting my mom meant being a bad daughter, destroying the family, not appreciating her sacrifices. And then Ryan came into my life. We met at a marketing conference. He was representing a technology company. I was representing my agency. There was some special chemistry between us right away, not only romantic, but intellectual. We could spend hours discussing ideas, arguing, laughing. Ryan was the first to ask a direct question. Why do you always cancel plans when your mom calls? I remember being confused. She needs me, I replied. And you need her just as much? He asked. And the question made me think. Ryan saw something I refused to notice. How I'd pale when my phone rang with my mom's name on the screen. How I'd immediately drop everything if my sister got in trouble once again. How I apologized for existing, for having my own plans, my own dreams. They're using you, he said once, when I canceled our weekend trip because of another family crisis. And the worst part is that you think it's okay. I took offense then. We almost broke up. But something in his words hurt me, made me finally look at the dynamics of our family relationship from the outside. After that incident, I started to notice patterns. How my mom would call at the exact moments when I was happy or making plans. How Ashley would show up with problems that needed immediate solutions just when I had something important planned. When Ryan and I got engaged, my mom reacted strangely. Are you sure? She asked. He's so independent. Aren't you afraid you'll lose yourself around him? It was so ridiculous that I even laughed. But Mom wasn't kidding. And that's when I realized for the first time that she doesn't want me to be happy with someone else. She wants me to always be there for her, available, ready to support, to help, to sacrifice. Ryan and I got married 2 years ago. In that time, I've started setting boundaries. Slowly, tentatively, but persistently. And I've noticed how my family's reaction has changed. My mom became more manipulative, Ashley more accusatory. And now this vacation lie. The last straw. The cab pulled up outside Mark's office. Ryan, sitting next to me, squeezed my hand. Ready? He asked. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of fear and determination. Mark met us in his office, littered with folders and papers. He had always seemed to me the epitome of chaotic competence, disheveled, in a perpetually wrinkled shirt, but with a sharp mind and a phenomenal memory for detail. I've checked everything I could find, he said after the greetings, spreading out the papers in front of us. And the news is not good. He started with the basic stuff, the business co-ownership papers I'd signed years ago. Those papers give your mother the right to make financial decisions on your behalf without having to get your consent every time, Mark explained. In effect, you've handed her carte blanche to use your name in financial transactions. I felt the blood drain from my face. What does that mean? Mark grimaced. It means that loans have been taken out in your name at 3 different banks in recent years. The total amount is about $200,000. What? I couldn't believe my ears. That's impossible. I would have known. Not necessarily. Mark shook his head. The notices could have come to the business address. And the signature. Legally, it's your signature, though I'm pretty sure you didn't put it there. Ryan put a hand on my shoulder, silently supporting me. There are other problems, Mark continued. From the documents I've been able to get, the money from the loans wasn't invested in developing the coffee shops. They went to other purposes. What purposes? My voice sounded strange even to myself. It's harder to figure out without a full audit, Mark tapped his pen on the papers. But there are transfers to personal accounts. There are real estate purchases. Not in your name, mind you. There are tuition payments to a private art school. Ashley, I whispered. They used my name to pay Ashley's tuition. Suddenly, everything fell into place. The strange excuses when I asked to see financial statements. The constant talk of hardship, even when the business was clearly expanding. My mom's new car, which she said she leased through the company. The expensive studio Ashley rented for her creative projects, supposedly with money from the sale of her artwork, even though I knew her art wasn't generating serious income yet. Lauren, Mark's voice brought me back to reality. You need to understand. Legally, you're responsible for these loans. If they aren't paid off, the consequences could be very serious. I stared at the documents spread out in front of me and felt the last illusion crumble. All these years I had thought I was supporting my family out of love and duty. In reality, I was just being used. What should I do? I asked, surprised at the calmness in my voice. The first thing to do is revoke the power of attorney. Mark handed me a form. That will stop the ability to take out new loans in your name. Then we'll need to do a full audit and see what other surprises we can uncover. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled, but my resolve was harder than stone. 17 years of manipulation, lies, and exploitation was ending here and now. For 3 days, I'd been gathering my courage to talk to my family. 3 days of studying the documents Mark had provided, checking dates, amounts, signatures. 3 days of rejecting calls, ignoring texts, and preparing for a battle I had put off for far too long. Mark suggested we meet on neutral ground, not at my mom's house, where I'd feel like I was 15 again, and not at Ryan's and my place, so as not to turn our safe space into a battlefield. We chose a small cafe in the business center with private meeting rooms, professional, formal, impersonal. I arrived first, deliberately. I wanted to take a position of strength, not to wait for them, but for them to wait for me. A waiter escorted me to my reserved office, brought me water and coffee. I laid out the folders with documents, turned on the recorder in my phone, as Mark had advised, and waited. The first to arrive was Aunt Judith, always punctual. Her eyes widened at the sight of the papers on the desk. "Lauren, honey, what's going on?" She tried to hug me, but I took a step back. "Let's wait for the others." My voice sounded calmer than I expected. Ashley walked in next, looking both annoyed and guilty. "Seriously, Lauren? This whole circus over one vacation?" I just shook my head. It was amazing how she always had a knack for downplaying everything. Mom showed up last, with that special martyr expression on her face that she used in difficult situations. Her eyes were slightly reddened, perfect to make me feel guilty, but not enough to look melodramatic. "Lauren, honey," she began, sitting down across from me. "I've been so worried. You haven't been answering your cell phone. You haven't been coming to family dinner. What's going on?" I looked at all three of them. My family. The people who were supposed to be the closest, the most reliable. The people who had betrayed me for years. "I found out about the loans," I said without preamble, "and about the real estate you sold, and about how you used my name for financial fraud." Mom blinked, but quickly regained her composure. "What are you talking about, honey? What shenanigans?" "Don't do that." I opened the first folder. $200,000 in loans in my name. 3 banks, 7 years. My signature, which I didn't sign. Aunt Judith turned pale. Ashley was suddenly interested in her manicure. Only Mom maintained a semblance of calm. "Lauren, you know you have a stake in the business. It's common practice to take out loans for growth. I thought you understood." "No," I interrupted her. "I didn't understand anything. Because you never explained anything, you just used me." "That's not fair," Ashley interjected. Mom has done so much for this family. She's been the one pulling the business together after Dad died. And you," I turned to my sister. "Did you know that your art school was paid for with money borrowed in my name? Money that I now have to pay back?" Ashley was silent, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Something guilty. Knowing? I couldn't pinpoint exactly. Lauren, Mom tried to take my hand across the table, but I pulled away. I just wanted to protect you from unnecessary stress. You've always been so sensitive, so worried about everything. I didn't want to bother you. Worry. I felt a wave of anger rising inside. You didn't want to bother me. Is that why you forged my signature? Is that why you hid financial statements? Is that why you lied to me for years? I didn't lie. Mom raised her voice. I was doing what a mother is supposed to do. Take care of her children. About both of you. Take care? I opened another folder. What about the lake house? The one Dad left me in his will? The same one that was sold 3 years ago for $350,000? Where's that money, Mom? There was silence in the room. Ashley stopped even pretending not to listen. Aunt Judith closed her eyes as if in pain. It was necessary. Mom's voice grew quieter. The business was on the verge of bankruptcy. We needed the money to keep afloat. And instead of telling me the truth, you decided to sell my property without my knowledge? Technically, Mom cleared her throat. Technically, the house wasn't entirely yours. It was part of the family inheritance, and as guardian. There was no guardianship. I slammed my palm on the table. I was 29 when you sold the house. I was a grown man, a married woman. Lauren, please. Aunt Judith finally spoke up. Let's all just calm down. I'm sure we can work this out as a family. As a family? I laughed bitterly. What kind of family lies to each other? What kind of family steals from each other? No one steals anything. Ashley jumped to her feet. You were always so dramatic. Always thought the whole world revolved around you. Daddy's favorite, the pride of the family. And now you're blaming us because you're jealous we went on vacation without you. Ashley, that's enough, Aunt Judith said abruptly. Sit down and be quiet. To my surprise, my sister complied. Lauren, Auntie turned to me. What your mother did was wrong. I knew about some things, but not all of them. I should have intervened sooner, and I'm sorry I didn't. Judith! Mom looked shocked. No, Veronica. Auntie shook her head. That's enough. The girl deserves the truth. She looked at me again. After your father died, things really didn't go well in the coffee houses. Your mother had no experience running a business. There were debts, there were problems. But instead of recognizing that, of asking for help, she started finding workarounds. What workarounds are you talking about? I felt my throat constrict. At first, it was little things. Small loans she took out in your name, with the intention of repaying quickly. Then the sale of equipment that was idle. Then, more. She convinced herself she was doing it for her family, that she had no choice. I had no choice! Mom was almost screaming. What was I supposed to do? Watch what John was building crumble? Tell the kids we could no longer afford what they were used to? You could have told the truth. My voice sounded tired. You could have trusted us enough to tell the truth. The truth? Mom laughed bitterly. The truth is that I failed. I failed to keep what your father built. I failed to be as smart, as forward-thinking. I was just trying to survive, Lauren, trying to protect you both. Protect? I shook my head. You weren't protecting us. You were protecting yourself, your pride, your image of the perfect mom who can handle everything. Ashley spoke suddenly, quietly, almost a whisper. I knew about the school. Mom said you agreed to help pay for it because you believe in my talent. I looked at my sister, really looking at her for the first time in a long time. Not as a spoiled brat, not as a perpetual rival, but as another victim of Mom's lies. I'd help if you asked, I said. I'd help if I knew the truth. Mom suddenly did something I never expected her to do. She cried. Not the neat tears she shed in public, when she needed to elicit sympathy. Real, ugly sobs that were impossible to control. I just wanted to be a good mother, she sobbed. Wanted you to be proud of me, like you were proud of John. I wanted to be strong. Real strength is in honesty. I held out a tissue to her. In admitting your mistakes. In asking for help when you need it. Mom took the napkin, but continued to cry. What do you want, Lauren? For me to lose everything? For us to sell the coffee shops? That would kill me. It's all I have left of John. And there it was, the emotional blackmail that had always worked before. I could almost physically feel that familiar feeling of guilt, of responsibility, of wanting to make things right, rising up inside. But not this time. I want out of the business, I said firmly. Officially. I want compensation for the house that was sold without my consent. And I want the truth, the full truth, about what else you've done in my name. Lauren, please. Mom reached across the table. We're family. We can work this out together, without lawyers, without formal papers. No, I shook my head. No more secrets. No more manipulation. We'll do it right, legally. And if I refuse? A note of steel appeared in Mom's voice. Then I'll sue, I replied just as firmly. Dash dash. For signature forgery, for fraud, for illegal sale of property. Is that what you really want? Aunt Judith exhaled sharply. Ashley stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time in her life. You wouldn't do that. Mom shook her head. You're not dragging your family into a public scandal. Don't test me. I started gathering my papers into a folder. You have a week to contact my attorney and start the process. If I don't hear from him in a week, I'll file a lawsuit. I stood up, feeling oddly light. It was as if the huge weight I'd been carrying for years had suddenly disappeared. Lauren, Ashley started, but I held up my hand, stopping her. I can't talk to you right now. I need some time. Please respect that. I headed for the door, but my mom's voice stopped me. If you do this, we are no longer family, she said quietly, but clearly. Do you understand? You'll ruin everything we have. I turned around one last time. No, Mom. You've already ruined it with your lies. I'm just trying to save myself. And with those words, I walked out, closing the door behind me. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, feeling my knees shaking, my heart beating fast. Through the door, I could hear muffled voices, Mom sobbing, Ashley yelling, Aunt Judith trying to calm them down. It was over. The end of pretending, the end of manipulation, the end of a life where I was just a pawn in someone else's game. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Ryan. Coming home. It's done. I felt drained, devastated, like I'd been through a serious illness. But along with the devastation came a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I made a choice just for me, not thinking about how it would affect others, not trying to save and protect everyone. I walked out of the building into the bright sunlight. The people around me were going about their business, rushing to appointments, talking on the phone. A normal day for them. But for me, it was different. This day was the boundary between the past, where I was a convenient daughter willing to do anything for the family peace, and the future, where I could finally be myself. There was no turning back. And for the first time, that thought didn't scare me, but filled me with hope. How are you feeling today, Lauren? I sat in a cozy chair across from Maggie Brooks, my therapist. Rain was drizzling outside the window, the drops dripping down the glass, creating a soothing background noise. Better? I replied after a pause. But sometimes it hits me. I wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like I've made a terrible mistake. Maggie nodded. She didn't rush into advice, didn't tell me that my feelings were wrong, or that time heals. She just listened. And that was exactly what I needed most. After the confrontation with my family, a month passed. A month of silence and distance that was harder on me than I expected. For 32 years, my life had been intertwined with their lives. 32 years of waking up thinking, what does Mom need today? And falling asleep thinking about Ashley's problems. Breaking that bond was more painful than I imagined. Guilt is a natural reaction, Maggie said, especially for someone who's been the family peacemaker all her life. You've broken an unspoken contract you've lived by for years. That kind of change is always painful. Sometimes I think, maybe I should have forgiven. Maybe family is more important than the truth. And what does family mean to you? Maggie asked. And that simple question got me thinking. What is family? People connected by blood? Or people who care for each other, respect each other, support each other? If the former, then yes, I have destroyed a family. If the second, maybe I never had a real family. I don't know, I answered honestly. That's okay, Maggie smiled. It's part of your journey to redefine for yourself what family means, what love means, what caring means. You're building a new value system. After the session, I walked out into the drizzling rain, feeling strangely light. Each conversation with Maggie brought small insights, small steps toward understanding myself. I made my way to the small building on the corner of Center Street and the park, the place that had become the center of my new life over the past weeks. An empty room with large windows and an old wooden floor. Nothing special yet. Bare walls, a few boxes of tools, the smell of fresh paint. But in my imagination, it was already Sweet Harbor, the bakery I'd been dreaming of since the first time I helped my dad make his famous apple pie. There you are! Ryan appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee. How was your meeting with Maggie? Good. I accepted the coffee gratefully. She says I'm making progress. Ryan put one arm around me. I'm proud of you. You know that, right? I nodded, snuggling up to him. He was my constant in this chaos, my anchor, my support. Without him, I probably would have given up after the first legal letter from my mother. A week after our meeting at the coffee shop, my mother hired a lawyer who offered a laughable compensation, a tenth of the value of the house we sold. Mark called it insulting and prepared a counteroffer. Negotiations continued to this day, slowly and painfully. The letter from Mark came, Ryan said, sipping his coffee. They've increased the offer. Still not enough, but there's progress. I sighed. I don't understand why they can't just admit the truth and do what's right. Because that would mean admitting they've been wrong all these years. Ryan shrugged. Some people find it easier to lose money than face. I looked around the room. The business plan was ready. The loan had been approved. My own loan in my name, with my signature. And the down payment on the rent had been made. A few more weeks of work, and the dream I'd been putting off for years would become a reality. Aunt Judith called yesterday, I said, watching the raindrops on the window. Wants to get together? To talk. And what did you decide? I shrugged. I don't know. Part of me wants to hear what she has to say, but the other part is afraid it's another manipulation. Ryan didn't push, didn't advise, just was there for me. That was one of his most valuable qualities. He let me make my own decisions, even if it meant making mistakes. It used to be hard for me to say no. I was always afraid to disappoint, to offend, to cause disapproval. Now I was learning this simple word that meant so much to my independence. No, I can't take on this project now, I told my boss at work. No, we can't make it this weekend, I replied to a friend who had invited us to a party. No, I'm not ready for this conversation, I texted Aunt Judith. Each no was hard to give, but it got easier. Each time the world didn't crumble from my refusal, I became a little stronger. That evening, I was standing at the window of my future bakery, making notes on the arrangement of equipment, when I heard a knock at the door. On the threshold stood a woman in her 50s, with short graying hair and lively eyes. Hi, neighbor. She waved her hand. I'm Diane Reed, owner of the bookstore across the street. Saw the light and thought I'd stop by. I invited her in, a little embarrassed by the mess. Sorry about the chaos. We're just starting renovations. Oh, I remember that stage, Diana laughed. When are you opening? Hopefully in 2 months, if everything goes according to plan. And what are we going to have here? She looked around with interest. A bakery. Sweet Harbor. Great! Diana clapped her hands together. Dash dash. Books and baked goods are the perfect combination. My customers will love it. We got to talking. It turned out Diane had owned her store for 15 years. She started with a tiny kiosk, gradually expanded, survived the advent of ebooks and large chain stores. I won't lie, the first few years were hell, she admitted as we settled into makeshift chairs made from boxes. Endless loans, working until you drop, the constant fear of failure. But you know what? It was worth it. There was such confidence, such quiet strength in her words, that I felt an involuntary sense of hope. Maybe I could do it too? Do you have any experience in baking? Diana asked. Only an amateur one, but I've taken courses and… That's not enough, she shook her head, but without judgment. You need someone with experience, at least at first. Someone to teach you all the things they don't tell you in courses. I was just placing an ad looking for a baking chef, but… Forget the ad, Diana waved her hand. I have the perfect candidate. My niece Rachel worked at Sweet Dreams on Fifth Avenue until they closed a month ago. Talented, hardworking, with great taste. I blinked, surprised by this turn. That would be great, but… No buts. Diana pulled out her phone. Dash. I'll give her your number. You talk to her, decide if she's a good fit. But I wouldn't wait too long if I were you. Such specialists don't stay unemployed for long. To my surprise, I didn't feel irritated by her assertiveness. Diana didn't have the manipulative insistence that I was used to in my family. Just the genuine desire to help and the businesslike candor of someone who knows what she's talking about. Thank you, I said. Really, thank you. Diane stayed for another half hour, talking about the neighborhood, about other business owners nearby, giving practical advice about vendors and the local area. When she left, I was left standing in the middle of my future store with the feeling that I had just gotten much more than business advice. Perhaps I had found a new mentor, maybe even a friend. At home, Ryan met me with news from Mark. The mother's attorney had requested another week to mull over our proposal. They're stalling, I sighed, sinking down onto the couch. They're hoping I'll give in, agree to a lower amount. You won't give up, Ryan said confidently. How can you be so sure? He sat down next to me, taking my hands in his. Because I can see how you've changed over the weeks. You've gotten stronger, more confident. You're starting to realize your worth. I pressed myself against him, feeling warmth spill into my chest. Maybe he was right. Maybe this whole painful experience was necessary for me to finally see myself for who I was. Not the convenient daughter, not the family peacemaker, but a person with her own desires, her own dreams, and the right to her own life. My phone vibrated. A message came in from an unknown number. Hi, I'm Rachel, Diana's niece. She said you need a baking chef? I smiled and began typing a reply, feeling each word, each decision bringing me closer to a new life. A life I'd chosen for myself. The air smelled like vanilla and freshly baked bread. I stood in the middle of my nearly finished bakery, watching Rachel conjure up frosting for the desserts we would be serving at the opening in 3 days. Her hands moved with such confidence, such skill, that I felt like an imposter for a second. But then I reminded myself, this is my place, my dream, my future. Mistress! You have a visitor, Mike, our barista, called out, poking his head through the kitchen door. Aunt Judith stood in the hall, looking curiously at the brand-new display case. I hadn't seen her in 4 months, since the day of the confrontation in the cafe. She looked different, as if she'd taken an invisible weight off her shoulders. Her hair was shorter, her clothes brighter, her posture straighter. Lauren? She took a step toward me, but stopped, not knowing how I'd react to the hug. Aunt Judith, I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. What brings you here? Heard you're opening next week. Wanted to see, she looked around the room. It's beautiful here. It's cozy. Thanks. I couldn't figure out what she wanted. Did you just come to see? My aunt sighed and sat down at one of the tables. Not only. I came to apologize. And to tell you something. I hesitated, but then sat down across from her. A lot had changed over the months. The legal process was finally over. We'd signed a settlement agreement a month ago. I was compensated for the house I'd sold, and officially out of the family business. Not as much as I deserved, in Mark's opinion, but enough to not have to drag the case to court and move on. "I'm no longer in contact with your mother," my aunt said, looking me in the eye. "We had a big fight after that day." I said things to her that I should have said a long time ago. I blinked in surprise. Aunt Judith had always been the peacemaker, always smoothing over corners, always trying to reconcile everyone. Why? Because she didn't want to admit she was wrong. Even after everything that came to light, she kept making excuses, blaming circumstances. You, everyone but herself. Auntie shook her head, and I suddenly realized that I'd been indulging in it for years. Closed my eyes when I should have intervened. She pulled an envelope out of her bag and placed it on the table. "What's this?" I made no attempt to take it. "Your father's letters?" "He wrote them to you when you were at summer camp before he died. Your mother intercepted them, said they were too emotional and might upset you. I found them when I was helping her sort through her pantry a couple months ago." I felt my throat constrict. Letters from my father? Letters I'd never seen? "Why are you showing them to me now?" "Because I should have done it years ago," Auntie replied simply. "And because you deserve to know how much he loved you." I took the envelope, feeling its weight. Not physical, but emotional. Inside were pieces of the man I'd lost too soon. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," my aunt continued. "I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you, that you found the strength to break this vicious cycle, that you're creating something of your own." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hug her. Another part of me wanted to ask her to leave. In the end, I just nodded. "Thank you," I finally said, "for the letters and for the truth." When she left, I sat looking at the envelope for a long time, but not daring to open it. It was a bridge to the past, to a man whose love had never been conditional, whose acceptance I didn't have to earn. That night, Ryan and I read the letters together. I cried, I laughed, and I felt an old wound healing, not completely, but enough to move on. 2 days after my aunt's visit, I decided to take the step I'd been putting off for months, to visit my mom. Not to reconcile, not to forgive, but just to close that chapter of my life. She lived in the same house where I had spent my childhood, but now it seemed smaller, more cramped, as if it had shrunk with the illusions that inhabited it. My mom opened the door, and I saw a look of hope flash across her face, replaced by caution. "Lauren," she stepped back, letting me inside. "I'm glad you came." We sat down in the living room, the same living room where the whole family had once gathered for Christmas, where my father read me stories, where I realized for the first time that I had to be strong for the sake of others. "I'm opening a bakery," I said after an awkward silence. "In 2 days." "I heard," Mom nodded. "Ashley talked." Ashley was the only one I kept any contact with. Occasional texts, short conversations. She'd at least tried to apologize, acknowledged her part in what was going on. You look good," Mom said, obviously choosing her words. "Happy." I'm happy," I replied honestly. "For the first time in a long time, I'm doing what I want to do, not what others expect me to do." Mom sighed, and I saw a familiar expression in her eyes, a mixture of resentment and reproach. "You sound like we've been keeping you imprisoned." "No," I shook my head. "I was an adult, and I allowed it myself. But I choose differently now." The conversation wasn't adding up. Mom couldn't resist the little jabs, the reminders of my duty to my family, the hints of how hard it was for her, because of my actions. She didn't apologize, not once. Didn't admit that she was wrong, that she had hurt me. I left an hour later with a heavy heart, but also with a realization. Some people are incapable of change. They'd rather cling to their version of reality than admit they were wrong. The opening day of Sweet Harbor was sunny and warm, as if the sky itself was blessing my endeavor. Diane had brought a huge bouquet of wildflowers. Rachel had outdone herself with an assortment of baked goods, and Mike had created a special coffee menu with titles dedicated to literary characters, a small tribute to Diane's bookstore. I stood behind the counter, accepting congratulations, smiling, thanking, and feeling in my place. Ryan was helping with the cash register, winking at me every time our gazes met. Suddenly, I saw her. My mom was standing at the entrance, shuffling uncertainly from foot to foot. Our eyes met across a hall full of people. I didn't smile, didn't wave, just stared. She did too. The moment stretched on, filled with unspoken words, unshed tears, unforgiven grudges. Then she nodded slightly, a barely perceptible movement that could have been mistaken for an accident if it weren't for the intensity of her gaze. And she left without buying anything, without saying a word. I continued working, smiling, accepting congratulations. But something changed inside. Not forgiveness, no, but perhaps the first step toward accepting reality as it is, not as I would like it to be. In the evening, when the last visitors had left, Ryan and I sat on the small terrace of our house. The stars twinkled in the dark sky, and the air was filled with the scent of jasmine from our neighbor's garden. I felt pleasantly tired and deeply satisfied. Here's to you. Ryan raised his glass of wine. Here's to your courage, your tenacity, and your bakery. I smiled, clinking my glass with his. Here's to us. I couldn't have done it without you. Not true. He shook his head. You're stronger than you think. You always have been. We sat in cozy silence, enjoying the moment. I thought about the path we'd traveled, the pain and loss, the new beginnings and newfound freedom. You know, I said, looking up at the stars, I always thought family was blood, genes, commitment. But now I realize family is respect, it's security, it's people you can be yourself around. Ryan squeezed my hand. And sometimes we make our own family. I nodded, thinking about Diane, who had become almost a mother to me over the months, of Rachel, whose dedication and honesty reminded me of my father, of Mike, whose sense of humor got me through the most stressful days of preparing for the opening, and Aunt Judith, who had the courage to admit her mistakes and try to make things right. Suddenly, my phone rang, breaking the serenity of the moment. The name on the screen read, Mom. I stared at the flickering screen, feeling a familiar wave rising inside, a mixture of duty, guilt, hope. Old patterns tried to take over, whispering, Answer it! You have to! She's your mother! Family comes first! But now I knew better. I knew I deserved a relationship based on mutual respect, not manipulation. Knew I could set boundaries and stick to them. Knew that my happiness mattered. I took a deep breath and made a decision, not out of obligation or guilt, but out of what I truly wanted in that moment, out of the freedom of choice that I had won at such an expensive price.
Любі глядачі, дякую вам за перегляд, ставте лайки та підписуйтесь на канал. Також напишіть в коментарях, чи погоджуєтесь ви з Дженніфер, чи вона мала розказати все матері, чи ні, чи мала все розказати своєму коханцю щодо свого чоловіка, чи ні. І також прокоментуйте, чи вам сподобалось це відео.